Hi, I'm Dajana Yoakley. I'm a peaceful parenting coach and mom of three, and I'm delighted to give you the latest science-backed research on child development, parenting, and to support you in showing up as the parent that you want to be. Welcome. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining me again on the podcast. I'm Dajana Yoakley, your host, and I have here with me Elaine Taylor-Klaus. Welcome, Elaine. I'm so delighted to have you on the podcast today.
I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I'm so delighted to have Elaine today because we're going to be talking about back to school fun. So it's the time of the year in the United States, and I know in Europe, maybe you have a few more weeks or months of summer. In Australia, you might not be on break, but eventually when you transition back to school, it can be such an intense, emotionally intense time period for many kids, and we're going to dive into that today. A little bit about Elaine. If you're not familiar with her, which I'm sure many of you are because of her amazing books on parenting, that's how I found out about her work. But Elaine is a master certified coach, author, and co-founder of Impact Parents. She's dedicated her career to supporting parents of what she calls complex kids, children with ADHD, anxiety, learning differences, and other challenges that make everyday parenting, well, not so everyday, right? Elaine is also the creator of Sanity School, a training program that helps parents and teachers respond with confidence instead of chaos. And if you've ever wondered why your child feels so deeply, why traditional discipline seems to backfire with your child, or how you can show up as your best self, even in the toughest parenting moments, this episode is for you. So Elaine, welcome. And maybe we can kick it off briefly with how you came to do this work, and you can kind of give us a little bit more details around the offerings that Impact Parents has today.
First of all, thank you for having me, and I'm thrilled to be having this conversation. It's one of my favorites, because back to school is fraught, and you use the term transition, which is such a key understanding of everything that we deal with so often, the challenges we face. I do this work because when I was a mom of young kids, I had three kids under the age of 10, and those first 10 years were pretty challenging and stressful and overwhelming and maxing me out. And there was just what I found in those days was there was a lot of support available for my kids, and there was very little available for me as a mom trying to navigate these three complex kids. And um, and there was, if you happen to be able to go to a support group across town at 7:30 on a Tuesday night once a month, maybe there was that, but that was all there was. And I needed help. I needed more than, the 5 minutes at the end of my kids' therapy session. I needed guidance. I needed a Sherpa. And I didn't need therapy. I needed help. And the long story short is when somebody suggested, one of my kids providers suggested that I look into coaching. And I was actually on my way to go to graduate school to get a PhD to help other parents when I couldn't find a program that met my schedule with three small kids. Right? You understand, you have three young kids. And
Yeah.
and so the long story short is I went into coaching as a kind of stopgap. I was going to do it for a year and I fell in love. The first coaching class I went to, I called my husband in tears. I'm like, found it. This is it. This is because coaching to me is, it was very clear that it was different from what I was getting in therapy and training and those kinds of things. It was empowerment based. It was looking at my kids as whole and not broken. It invited me to shift perspectives and see them differently and communicate with them differently. And, you don't have to be your kid's coach. In fact, I don't think you should be your kid's coach to take a coach-like approach. And when I began to just kind of shift how I was communicating with them in very subtle, nuanced ways, the impact was profound. And it began to shift our entire family dynamic. My kids started to do better. I was calmer and happier. I was more relaxed. Eventually, my husband could no longer deny anymore that what I was doing was working. And so he actually,
Yeah. I love that.
right?
That's a big question often is like, how do I get my partner on board? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that may be another conversation because I have a whole theory on that one if you want to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but But so the long story short is when I became a coach, I became a much better parent, and it wasn't rocket science.
Hmm.
And I realized it was something
Hmm.
I could bring to other parents. And when I met Diane Dempster, who's my business partner now of almost 15 years, she had a parallel experience, except for that I am a neurodiverse adult. I was diagnosed in my 40s
Hmm.
with attention and learning disabilities. And she is not a neurodiverse adult. And this coach approach thing worked for both of us. So we knew we were onto something, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so that's where it was originally Impact ADHD, now Impact Parents, because we wanted to better reflect the full range of challenging issues our kids are facing, our parents are facing, our professionals are facing. And so we support parents of complex kids and the professionals who support them with this
Hmm.
very innovative, neuro-informed coach approach. So it's a coaching model that has neurodiversity built into it. And it's
Hmm.
and it's been really effective. And we've had this beautiful opportunity for literally millions of parents all over the world. And we got in before the internet was kind of a thing. I mean, it was very early on. So we've always been virtual. When
Hmm.
it shut the world down and everybody came to Zoom, we were like, welcome, we're already here, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really profound work because the focus is not actually on the kids. Here's the secret, everybody. The focus is on you, the parent. And parenting is about the parent. And it's not as much about what we do as it is about who we're being and how we're showing
Hmm.
parent. And when we begin to be conscious of how we show up as a parent and what's motivating our behaviors and how we're communicating, it begins to shift the dynamic in the home in really powerful ways.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love that. Just going really deep straight at the beginning, which I love. And I'm wondering, if sometimes parents listening, sometimes it feels like society will say, well, the child's behavior is a reflection of the parent. And in the news, it's always like blame the parents. At the same time, I know that you probably would extend the philosophy to say like your child's behavior doesn't reflect you as a parent. Parenting is about the parent, but that doesn't mean that what your child does is is a reflection of who you are and how you're parenting necessarily. So maybe you can kind of
Yeah.
clarify that a little bit to extend, especially with neurodiverse challenges and those things.
So it's a great observation. So there are two things I would say to that. One is kids' behaviors are behaviors, right? They are trying to tell us something. They are a symptom that something is going on where they don't feel capable, safe, understood, seen. Like their behaviors
Mhm.
are a sign for us. And if we stop looking at them as whether they got it right or wrong, and we start interpreting and getting curious about what's going on, their behaviors are always communicating. The question is, are we paying attention to what they're communicating? Right? In terms of are we as parents, like, do we cause these behaviors or not? Sometimes we do, but that's not
Mhm.
what's really important, right? What's really important is that up until now, you've done whatever you've done, right? You've been the kind of parent you've been, you've made the kind of interpretations you've made, whatever. From here forward, you can say, okay, a behavior is a sign that they are trying to communicate something, and we can get curious. And as we begin to shift how we respond to those signs, we begin to influence and help them manage their behaviors because our kids, especially neurospicy kids, are
Mhm.
struggling with managing behaviors. They're struggling with self-regulation. They're struggling with being able to feel safe or present or connected or confident. And so if we interpret their behaviors and if we make it about us, then we're not actually supporting them. If we can do our work, we often say if we do our own deep inner work, right? If we take ourselves, do the work to get ourselves out of the way, to get our anxiety out of the way, our fear out of the way, our frustration out of the way. And I know it's hard, that's a whole other conversation, right? But when we can manage our own emotional reactivity, then we can be present to them and what their needs are. And that's the ultimate gift of parenting is that I can
Mhm.
pull myself out so I can be present to you and what you need right here. And I don't care if we're talking about 4-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 24-year-old, a 34-year-old. As a parent,
Mhm.
it's not that we can't show them who we are and what we feel and what we care about, but we don't want to conflate the two, right? We want to make sure
Yeah.
we're clear that we're doing our stuff so that when we do show up to them, it's in their service of them. It's not about calming us down or making us feel better,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
That was
Mhm. Mhm.
that.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. It's a holistic approach. Like you said, there's this self-regulation piece and taking care of ourselves, and that's part of parenting. At the same time, it's like that's off stage things that we're working on stage with the child. Like I love this, like in service of them. Because so often in triggering situations, it's so hard not to take it personally. And then again, we go back into this like self-regulation focus, whereas the child is the one that needs the support and they're waiting. They're like, are you done yet? Are you done yet with your trigger? Because I'm still waiting, right? Like we haven't gotten to the other in parenting. It's still just about us. So obviously the approach is everything, but differentiating who needs what, when, and where we get the resources is kind of the discernment.
When I first started coaching, like the very first coach training I did before I actually did real coach training, was with a guy named Hal Runkle who wrote Scream Free Parenting. And
Uh-huh.
one piece I let, and he and I had a lot of, we did great together, and we also had some friction because his model is a great model, and it wasn't very, in my opinion, neurodiversity friendly. And
Hmm.
as I say that, I love the model, right? I love what I
Yeah.
learned from him. I just had to adapt it and apply it to neurodiverse families. But one of the things he said that is so, so true is that when you hear yourself, when you notice that you're losing it and screaming at your kid, what you're really screaming at them is calm me down,
Yes.
right? You're really saying to them, okay, it's your job to calm me down.
Yeah.
And the truth is, we're the grown up in the room. It's our job to calm ourselves down. And so we've got to do our work around that. Like Diane teaches a class twice, 2, 3 times a year called Parenting the Adventure Within. And it's a 4-week class specifically about kind of getting ourselves out of the way and doing
Hmm.
work to take care of ourselves and to focus on what does self-care look like and what does it look like to downregulate ourselves so that we can be fully present to our kids.
Hmm. Hmm.
This stuff is hard, especially when you've got neurospicy kids. It's just hard.
Yes, it is. It is. And then you throw in the mirror neurons and, who's starting, who's ending. The whole thing becomes very
Regulate.
enmeshed. And
Yep.
now you just don't know, like, where to go. It just feels bad all around. And yeah, I'd love to take this framework of what we're talking about and apply it to back to school because I see this as a very emotionally overwhelming transition for kids. And then this whole thing about did the kids start it, did the parents start it, who's are we throwing gasoline on the fire, noticing that like this is coming from external input, not the relationship. There's a lot of factors here, and I think sometimes back to school catches parents off guard even though they are preparing for back to school. I think often it's like school shopping and the list, the routine with sleep, but the emotional piece, even if we're aware of it, actually can just still be really hard to live through for the first few weeks of back to school. So maybe we can kind of dive into that with what we're just talking about and how do we support our kids and support ourselves?
Yeah, I love that. What you've just called out is, and I think I alluded to it earlier, it's the difference between the doing and the being. And as parents, we focus a lot on what do I need to do? What do I have to do to get them ready? And I've got to get the school supplies and we've got to meet the teacher. And we focus on the lists and the doing and the structures and the logistics because one, they've got to get done, and two, they're kind of easy and effortless
Yeah.
compared to the emotional work of, okay, I have to prepare myself for another school year. And what if the teacher isn't a good fit? And what if they don't make friends this year? And what if we have another year like last year? Or what if we don't have another teacher like last year who was so amazing? Or like, so we go into the school year with all of this dialogue in our heads and all of this, all of these expectations that we
Mhm.
aren't really clear about. We're not communicating to anybody. We're just operating under these expectations and these assumptions, but we don't even realize we're doing it. And, we often say we do a lot of work around trigger management for parents and trigger regulation and that kind of stuff. And what we talk about is that the triggers happen, irritation happens in the gap between expectation and reality, right? Here's the reality.
Mm.
Here's what we thought it was going to be or wanted it to be or expected it to be. And if they don't line up, you've got this friction, right? It's almost like a
Mhm.
magnet that doesn't connect to either side.
Yeah.
And that creates an upset. And then when we get that upset, we can, if we notice it, we can decide to downregulate and navigate it, or we're going to get more and more agitated until it explodes if we don't know that it's there, right? So we have to
Mhm.
start by understanding that this time is really, it's complicated. Transition is hard for our kids. Transition is harder for us than we give ourselves credit. What
Yeah.
you're speaking to is that this is an emotional transition that we're very often not really registering.
Yeah, we're not registering it, yes,
Right.
until it's blowing up in front of us, and then we're like, "Where'd this come from?" Almost like we didn't see it coming.
Right. So I know there's a weird segue, but go with me for a second. Years
Mhm.
ago, I was working with a family, and they had a kid, a 12-year-old kid who was coming up on a bar bat mitzvah. And I remember saying to, and I'd been coaching them for a while, and I remember saying to them about 3 to 4 weeks out, start to expect that everyone in the family's stress level is going to rise.
I
Just
love
set
that.
the expectation. Have the conversation with the family around start 3 to 4 weeks out saying, okay, even if we don't know it, everybody's going to start getting a little anxious. Everybody, like, because there are
Mhm.
expectations of every member of a family when you're coming to a major milestone or event. Well,
Mhm.
back to school is a major milestone or event. And there are every member of the family, even if they're not consciously thinking about it, are know that there's expectations that they may or may not be able to hit. Or and
Mhm.
sometimes it's a sibling who's like, is my sibling gonna be that kid again this year and embarrass me? Or it's, there it could be a million different things.
Yeah.
But if we start by expecting
Yeah.
that stress is going to be higher, that we probably need to slow things down a little bit more, that maybe we need to try to do a little less, that
Mhm.
will set ourselves up for success. But we have a tendency at a time when emotions are heightened to then start piling on all of this other stuff we got to do. And we got to get the last of the school year in. We got to get to the pool one more time. And like, we actually don't, we set ourselves up for a lot of these explosions because we don't recognize that they're coming.
Mhm.
It's wild because they happen every year. It's
Yes. Yes. And even the holidays, like, or even end of school year when there's a lot of like end of school kind of goodbyes and rituals, and then transitioning into summer can be weird with the boredom setting in, the screen time battles. All of these are disruptions in the routine for kids. And inevitably that creates a sense of anxiety in their bodies, and then they act that out. And particularly with school, they're gone from the parent who I would assume is their primary attachment, their caregiver, and now they have to orient around a new attachment, which creates all sorts of anxieties around, am I safe? And if we're not safe, we are afraid. And if we're afraid, we will act out.
right,
Triggers, aggression, yelling, fighting,
a thousand
because
percent.
we just don't feel safe.
It's all about transition, and to your point, it's all about safety. And
Mhm.
we don't realize we don't realize that our kids aren't feeling safe. So I think that's a really good point. Like, we talk about this a lot around the work that we do with coach approach, because what we've come to understand is that
Mhm.
at the foundation, we all want our kids to become more independent. We want them to take ownership of themselves and all of that. But the foundation of that pyramid, we teach it as an independence pyramid, the very grounding of it is relationship and trust,
Mhm.
because we have to lean into the relationship and foster a sense of trust. The catch is that trust for them doesn't look like what we think it is. It's not, are we keeping our word? Or trust for them is, do I feel safe that you're not going to come in and try to take over and control me? Because kids are starting to, at a very early age, are starting to see, what can I do on my own? And
Mhm.
if their experience of us is, well, they're just going to, yeah, I'm either not going to do it the way they want it done, or they're not going to let me do it my way, or it doesn't matter what I think, they're going to tell me what they think anyway. Or, I mean, there are a million examples of the ways that we unintentionally are we think we're trying to help our kids,
Mhm.
and they may be experiencing it as a feeling of being controlled.
Mhm.
And it's subtle, right? It's nuance, it's little language. Like we talk about moving out of director mode and into collaborator mode. And the
Mhm.
shift is to ask, don't tell. And so just the simple notion of saying, what do you think about, or would you like to talk about, instead of, I think
Mhm.
you should. That
Mhm.
little nuance of language can help our kids feel like we want for them to gain this independence, not that we want from them to comply with whatever we think is important.
Yeah.
That control game happens starting at a really young age, when we feel like we're helping. And I really want to say this very clearly, because we think we're trying to help, and we are
Yeah.
trying to help, but we have to be aware of whether we're doing it in a way that they experience it as
Yeah.
not helpful, but as controlling.
Oh, I love this. I love this conversation because it comes down to like more than just giving them a sense of autonomy, but almost like permission to be different, to differentiate themselves,
Yeah.
to be their own person with their own DNA, and to respect that. Not to let them be in charge of parenting and now they're leader of the home. Not that, but more of like a deeper respect for their humanity and their right um to to become who they are without feeling like they can't do it. And I know in coaching, this is a big thing. Like when you're coaching a client, you don't want to seem like you know the answers and the client has to keep coming back because you know all their answers about their life. Eventually, the goal of coaching is to empower them, like in trauma recovery, empower them to feel like, what do you think would work for you? What are some ways that you think, like you want them to feel confident in themselves, empowered, like they have agency. And this is exactly what we're trying to do with raising kids, right? Even though they're not trauma, clients or whatever, and they're not parent coaching clients, but it's the same sense of identity, and you are like healthy self-esteem, confidence, and unconditional regard, right?
Right. And I love the way you said that, differentiating their like individuality, right? They are a
Yeah.
human being. And they, for many of us, if we birth our own kids, they come from us, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a hard notion, that, wait a minute,
Yeah.
they don't belong to us, right? They are their
Yeah.
own separate being. I often say our journey as parents is to be with them on their journey, to help them understand themselves well enough to actually want to learn to manage themselves.
Mhm.
And that's the process of moving towards independence. But if they feel like they have to do it a certain way, and it has to be our way, where it's never good enough, or like we communicate perfectionism in these really subtle ways that we don't
Mhm.
realize we're doing it. And our kids absorb it. And we don't know we're doing it. And I'm not saying that to blame us. I just think that we have to the more conscious we can be around it, the
Mhm.
better we're able to undo some of those subtle messages that we communicate. Because we want to create an environment that makes it okay for them to make mistakes. We want to
Mhm.
create an environment for them to take an experimenter's mind and to try things and to not always have it work. But if they feel
Mhm.
like, if we are refolding the laundry, reloading the dishwasher, like, then the message they're getting is that the process of learning for them isn't good enough.
Mhm.
And the process of learning requires making mistakes and making it better. That's
Yeah.
that's how it goes. And if we are in any way suddenly not allowing that, we're not affirming that, then
Mhm.
they're going to stop trying, or they're going to wait for you to do it so they don't do it wrong.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I love this. Yeah.
Stuck with that.
Hmm.
My kids said to me once, she was 16, they were 16 at the time. Um, and it has stuck with me. They're now 31, so it's been a while, right? They said, Mom, don't you see, if I haven't done it, I haven't done it wrong.
Hmm.
And I will
It's a
never
safe place to be.
moment, right? Because it had
Yeah.
to not getting schoolwork done. But it's not that they didn't care. It's that they cared so much that they didn't want to do it poorly.
Hmm.
And so sometimes I think we make assumptions that about what's motivating one of our kids' behaviors that may actually not be what's really going on for them, but maybe
Yeah.
we're interpreting it. And back to school
Hmm.
is a key time for that because we see school avoidance or resistance or not wanting to start homework or, complaining at the end of the school day as indicators that they're not trying or they don't care or,
Yeah.
we interpret that behavior. When in fact it may be that there's a lot of, as you say, a lot emotionally going on and they need to clear it. Got one of my kids
Hmm.
used to come in every day after school when he was in elementary school, and he had to complain for the first 10 minutes before
Hmm.
we get to anything good that was happening. And I had to stop saying, yeah, but what about? And just say, wow, what else? What else? And when
Yeah.
he's done complaining, he could get to the good stuff, but he had to clear that emotional stuff out of the way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and as we're talking about allowing them to differentiate and be their own person, accepting them even in their messy emotions, even in their uncomfortable complaining and like the moodiness and a fear of failure and I don't want to start because I don't want to fail. Accepting all of that, really that acceptance, would you say is like how we practice, especially when they're doing something that we don't really like. It's uncomfortable for us, tolerating our own discomfort while allowing them to be who they are in that moment. Obviously, setting limits around behaviors that are harmful, but feelings and experiences are all welcome because it's such a temporary thing, right? Like we often feel like these things are going to go on forever, so we try to control them, like you said. But if we realize it's more temporary, they can move through them and out. Like you said, 10 minutes and they're out. Whereas if we had gotten stuck on controlling that, like, why do you always have to complain? Then we add fuel to the fire. And now it becomes this thing. And now they actually are reinforcing this behavior and they're going to do it more because they're stuck in it now, right?
Yeah, well, and we've helped with that.
Yeah.
Early on at Impact, we started teaching a program called Minimize Meltdowns. It's now available as a master class. We just redid it this year. Um,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things we talk about is prevention versus management. And in
Mm-hmm.
that, we talk about when you've got a kid who's having an emotionally dysregulated moment, the question to ask is, like oftentimes parents feel like, I've got to stop this. I've got to stop it now.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you might, there might be safety involved. You might be, like sometimes you might, but sometimes you might actually need to let it run its course so that you can deal with what's on the other side. Because remember, I was talking about that irritation when people get triggered. If they don't down regulate and reclaim their brain, at some point, if they're really triggered, they may need to blow off steam to explode
Yeah.
in order to calm down, right? It's like the steam
Mm-hmm.
on a rice cooker, a pressure cooker.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to recognize when our kids need to explode and when they need when they're available for help down regulating. I had one kid in seventh grade who every single day at the end of the school day, I would pick them up and the van door could barely close before they would break in tears. Every day. It was
Mm-hmm.
hard. And it was a rough year. And we did change schools after that. Um, but they needed the breakdown. They needed the release before we
Yeah.
could, and I would say, okay, honey, here's your snack. And I just learned to expect it and not, I didn't try to stop it or judge it or make it wrong or why are you feeling this way or go to the school and yell at them. It was just all they were doing to hold it together all day.
Mhm.
And they needed to release before we could talk about anything else, and that was
Mhm.
just how they were navigating middle school at a place that wasn't really a great fit for them. And that's part of life is, it was, I could have pulled them out in the middle of the year. I don't think that would have been any better. We just learned to navigate it and to set expectations appropriately for where they were in that stage and phase, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But to do that, you have to know, you have to, as a parent, our job is there's not a right way and a wrong way. Our job is to pay attention to where are they now? Okay, now where are they?
Mhm.
Now where are they? What do they need now? And to be responsive to what they need instead of reactive to their behavior,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I love this. Like, obviously, we know that secure attachment is action, responsiveness in action.
Right.
But I think also what you're saying, which often in parenting, we kind of forget this, is perspective taking.
Hmm.
This is like a leadership skill, right? It's a life skill to take the perspective of another person. At the same time, it can be really
Yeah.
difficult
Yes.
to remember to do it. And even if you remember to do it in a way that's really connecting and empathic. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about how we can practice this perspective taking and its power, especially with, back to school and like, and again, it goes back to this, don't take it personally, but that's how do you not take it personally, right?
Yeah, we call it Q-tip, quit taking it personally. I think that you're absolutely right. Like the reason, again, the coach approach is so powerful is because coaching is about looking at something from multiple perspectives, without judgment, without shame. This is key, right? Very matter
Mhm.
of factly. And so, if you go back to earlier in our conversation about back to school, let's start with the expectation that emotions are going to be running high and that people are going to be hot and cold and people are going to, and maybe it's getting curious about what perspectives they are having instead of assuming. It's like having some conversations, not targeting. We want to be careful that when we're getting curious, we're not interrogating our kids.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
not what do you think about and how do you feel, and but it's really more general conversations that allow them to feel safe to express how they're feeling. And it may be modeling like, I realize it's back to school season. I kind of get nervous around back to school season. What goes on for you? That just something as simple as that can open up an opportunity for our kids to really share what's truly going on. And we can respond when we really understand what's going on with them.
Mhm.
Again, that key is to shift from reacting to responding, to meeting them
Mhm.
where they are, not reacting because they're not where we wish they were.
Mhm. And what does it say about us as a parent at the end, right? Like, if they're not where we wish they were, what does that say about me? And that can
Well,
be like a shame trigger for parents, right? For
right.
example.
Shame spiral starts. And what I will say is what that says about you is that you're human. And that is a natural, normal, typical human response and or reaction. And our game here, the opportunity in being a conscious parent and working towards conscious parenting is to begin to just notice when we have these tendencies to react and to begin, like we have a structure we teach for how do you escape the stress cycle, which is what this typically is. We're feeling stressed and then we get reactive. And one of
Mhm.
the steps in it, it's a 5-step thing, but one of the key steps is to recognize what story you're telling yourself
Mhm.
and make up a new story that works for you. Right? So I might
Yeah.
tell myself this kid's already getting off to a bad start at school, right? Well, is that really going to help anybody? It might be true, but it's not really going to help anybody. And if you take action based on that story, you're going to be
Mhm.
reactive, you're going to be controlling, you're going to be directive. But if you find something else that's also true. What else is also true?
Yes.
This is also true is my kid's having a hard time getting started in the school year. Well, if I
Mhm.
from that, I'm going to come from more compassion and less judgment, and I'm going to be more open. And my actions from there are going to likely be more supportive of them than if I feel like they're already screwing up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, hear the difference. It's the same situation, and both can
Yeah.
be true. That if
Mm-hmm.
I lean into the first one, it's going to lead me to react. If I lean into
Mm-hmm.
second thought, which is also true and I can believe is true, they're struggling right now. My kid's not being rude. They're having a hard time being respectful right now. Then I can support that differently and probably more effectively.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then depending on which way we show up, our kids reacting to that. So if we show up the first way, they're going to react more negatively, which isn't going to actually help them, even if it's true. And if we respond the second way, although it's still true, they have a better chance of feeling empowered to act differently and to support themselves and feel
Yeah,
better about the interaction, which will, when we feel better, we do better.
exactly. Melissa Orloff does a lot of work with adults with ADHD and specifically couples. But one of the tools she teaches that I really like is called stimulus, react, react, or she calls it response. I would say stimulus, react, react. There's a
Uh-huh.
stimulation, there's something that happens, then one person reacts to it, then the other person reacts to it. And now you end up in this reactive cycle where nobody's communicating with each other.
Yeah.
That the same thing happens with us with our kids. We get into
Mm-hmm.
where now they don't feel safe and they don't trust, and then we get upset because we're doing everything for them and they don't even appreciate it, and we just get into this vicious cycle. So we
Mm-hmm.
cycle, actually, to your point a little while ago, Diana, we can break that cycle by how we think about it, by the perspective we choose to take. Truly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I love the question of like, let's say both of them are true. Which one is actually more helpful? Do you want to feel good or feel bad? I mean, I know the negativity bias tends to go towards the negative. At the same time, how do you want to feel? This is your life. Do you
Yeah.
enjoy torturing yourself? If so, then go ahead. But also know that there's another way. And it's almost like goes back to that cliche of like, don't give your power away. Why are you
Yeah.
giving your power away? And I guess that's kind of this intersection where you could choose to do either one. One was going to give your power away to feel empowered and to actually shift things to solve the problem. The other one, you can actually take that power. And it is a relationship. So it's not like you have 100% impact on your child, but you are part of that. It takes two to tango, right? So one step, like you're like putting in more positives, and it's one less negative in the interaction there. And so clearly that's going to be more helpful than if you contribute the negatives too, even if your kid is frustrated and upset.
Really. Well, two things that come up for me when you say that. One is that would you rather be right or in relationship, right? We have a
Yes.
tendency to collect evidence to reinforce our negative position, to justify our resentment or our anger or whatever. So that's a piece of it. The other is I used to have a coach trainer named Rick Tamlin, whom I adored, and he used to say, it's all made up anyway, so make it good. If you're gonna make up a story to tell yourself, make up a story that works for you. Make up a
Yeah.
story that works for your kids because we're making stuff up all the time. None of this is true. These are just perspectives. And on any
Mm-hmm.
given situation you're dealing with in back to school time, I guarantee you, you could, if you gave yourself the assignment, you could come up with at least 10 perspectives on what's happening in that dynamic. And then you can
Mm-hmm.
choose the perspective you want to take. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Time for a quick little story, true story.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
My my son is now 24. When he was 7 or 8, I was like in coach training, I think, or early in my coach training. And I came across recently a piece of paper of a coaching exercise somebody had done with me. It's called a balance wheel. And my son was having a lot of tantrums at the time. And on this piece of paper, you can see at least 10 to 12 different perspectives on what could have been going on with him at the time. And one was the teacher's perspective, he's not trying hard enough. And another was the teacher's perspective, he's always smiling and he's so happy. And another was the dog's perspective and the sibling's perspective and the dad's. And we literally looked at, my coach walked me through about 10 to 12 perspectives. And then I was able to choose one to kind of to operate from, instead of the one that wasn't serving the family, which was, this kid is obnoxious, right?
Mhm.
Perspective that this kid is just obnoxious, and he kind of was at the time. you know that was
Yeah, yeah.
It was also true that he brought light to a room when he walked in, and that he was often smiling. And it was also true that he was curious. And so that choice of how am I going to see him changes how I'm going to interact with him. And that
Mhm.
is going to change outcomes for him. And that's our
Mhm.
opportunity as a parent,
Mhm.
especially
Oh, I
during
love that.
back to school.
Yeah, no, I love this. I love this. There's so many nuggets here, and I know parents listening are probably like, okay, like I really need to, if you're in the back to school season, you're thinking, I need to really start doing these things, not just listening to podcasts and thinking
Yeah.
about them. Because often we're thinking, and it's like the results are in the action. We've got to do something differently. Um, and so, yeah, I would love to share with the audience about the back to school workshop that you guys have coming up soon. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what parents
I
can,
would love to.
yeah, and we'll
So
link it below as well, but maybe a little bit about what they'll get from that.
I'd love to. Every month we do a live webinar, masterclass, workshop, something. Um,
Mhm.
in the fall season in the US, we do a free back to school webinar. We've been doing it for 14 years, so for a long time. And
Mhm.
the theme changes every year depending on kind of what's happening in the world and what parents are needing at the time. This year it's
Yeah.
called Back to School Without Burnout. For them or for us, and it's really practical strategies. It's speaking to the whole family unit. It's for parents of kids. I always say that we work with parents of complex kids, and right now we're all parenting kids in complex times. So this can apply to parents
Yeah.
of any kid, and in particular, if you've got a kid who I would call neurospicy, ADHD, anxiety, autism, learning disabilities, any of that kind of stuff, trauma for sure falls in that category. Giftedness falls in that category. Um, but the burnout risk is real for everybody more and more these days, especially with the
Mhm.
advent of AI and the way that technology has infused itself in our lives. I'm not saying we need to eliminate technology by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think we need to learn how to be in relationship with it. And
Yeah.
we're going to talk about what can we expect in this school year, because we've got these new issues coming up, and how to set ourselves up for success without burning out. And
Mhm.
people can find out about that. I'm going to make it really easy. If you go to impactparents.com/events, that's probably the
Events.
easiest way to get
Okay.
to.
And I know you guys have a podcast as well.
Yep,
Um,
we
and
have
I think, is that impactparents.com/podcast?
that's exactly it. And that
Okay.
it's
We'll
called
link
a
those below.
podcast. And so
Hmm. Hmm.
both of those are easy to find. They're easy on the
Yeah.
website. But if you just do /events or backslash podcasts, that was a
Mhm.
mouthful. And it's impactparents.com.
Yeah. Awesome. Oh my gosh, so many great insights and I love you guys' website. There's so many resources on there. I mean, it's really evident that there's been years and years of work in this because there's so many different types of resources. And I know we didn't dive deep into neurodiversity, ADHD, other executive function challenges, particularly with back to school that can be really challenging with academics and all of that. But the website has tons of resources about that. So if you are a parent with ADHD yourself, or your children or any other neurodiversity, there's a ton of resources on there that would be really supportive. Free resources, paid resources, personalized, whatever you're looking for. So thank you
Yeah.
so much. Yeah,
It was a pleasure. Great conversation.
it was. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I know that we all need this right now. So thank you. Appreciate it.